Hi, my name's Dave Lonergan, changing face of the Gold Coast. In this segment we're looking at Main Beach. And there was a meeting recently at the Southport Yacht Club organised by the Main Beach Association in relation to the high number of apartment buildings that have been built and planned in Main Beach on what were residential blocks of land, 700 metres, 800 square metres, 500 square metres. And a lot of the locals here are very concerned about the recent developments that are being approved here and whether this is the right direction to go for this region. And a lot of people further down the coast, all the way to Coolangatta, are seeing a lot of high-level apartment buildings going up on residential blocks of land. And the questions have been asked of council and of the state government: is this the proper way for the Gold Coast to be heading? And there's a difference between code assessed and impact assessed, and we'll discuss that very, very shortly. Thanks for watching.
Looking at the changing face of the Gold Coast, I'm here with Sue Donovan from the Main Beach Association and Judy Spence, two Main Beach locals who have a lot of insight into the changes that are happening here in Main Beach and all the way down to Coolangatta in terms of development on small blocks. There was a town meeting at the Southport Yacht Club Tuesday night, which was organised by the Main Beach Association. There was council members there, a lot of the public arrived, and a lot of things were discussed. One of the things that was discussed was the two different codes of assessment. Sue, if you'd just like to explain what's actually transpiring.
Sure. There are two kinds of assessment, and they're built into the State Planning Act, so it's not just the council, it's for the whole of Queensland, or certainly all of South East Queensland. Code accessible was an attempt to free up the ability of developers to develop if their development applications were substantially compliant with the Planning Act.
So code assessors only assessed internally by council officials?
Correct.
By council staff? Correct. In town planning, Gold Coast Council?
But a place like Main Beach, east of Tedder Avenue, is all code accessible. And what that means, unfortunately, is that the community has no right to be informed of what's happening. If a building is going up next to you, nobody has to tell you what's happening. The first thing you see is the sales board out. You have no right to lodge a formal objection, and worst of all, you have no right to appeal to the land and planning court.
So if an application is classed as impact accessible, a board goes up on the property, everyone, residents and non-residents, will see this building's going to get built here, and they can have some sort of input into the procedures.
A lot, and every objection that's made by the community in an impact accessible development has to be recorded, has to be responded to. Whereas really with these code accessible applications, they don't even have to read it. The planners don't even have to read what the local community has written.
So is that government? Is that state government or is that council?
It's state actually. It's part of the state planning legislation, and it was really the swing of the pendulum from where it was far too difficult for developers to develop without a huge amount of red tape, and it was designed to free that up, provided that the development application was basically compliant with the city plan. But unfortunately, we're now getting an enormous number of development applications that are extremely non-compliant, and they just keep getting passed with the community having absolutely no rights, and that comes as a huge shock to people to find that out.
What I've seen, and I've discussed this with a lot of people in Main Beach and further down the coast, is that a lot of the smaller blocks that are 500, 600, 700 square metres, or even smaller, that would have been originally subdivided in the 20s or 30s to have a small beach house.
That's right.
And now being snapped up by developers, and they're putting up a 30-storey, 40-storey building. And you've got to wonder, when the local council allowed that land to be cut up back in the 30s, did it ever occur to them that one day someone was going to be crazy enough to put a 30-storey building on a 700 square metre block?
They would never have dreamed of it. It would have been,
no.
The thought would have been so bizarre that, so what's happened, I think what's happened is an unintended consequence of the legislation. The legislation was not intended to have this outcome, but unfortunately there are loopholes.
The code assessed impact assessed legislation.
Yeah. So the thinking behind it was fine. We don't have a problem with the idea of code accessible.
No.
And
if the development complies with the town
exactly,
plan.
it's
But these
substantially,
developments,
that's right.
I mean, what we have learnt through this process is that the town plan on the Gold Coast is a worthless document because no one is complying with the town plan requirements, whether it's the height or the setbacks, and these developments are getting approved. So, you know, this is a council that wanted to allow a developer to build two 44-storey towers on the Spit, where it is zoned 3 stories. So, you know, yet again and again, we're just seeing them approve developments that are in no way compliant with the town plan.
Is that because there's very little public input, because it's code assessed, so it's not looked at externally other than by the council?
I think that's one of the big problems. The community, I mean, the Main Beach Association, along with the residents of Pintari, spent a lot of money getting the best legal advice in the world to say that this development in front of us does not comply with the town plan, and if you wanted to take it to court you may win, but you can't take it to court because it's code accessible and you, the community, have no say.
So that code assessed, the impact assessed, needs to be changed at a state level?
What we believe, no, well, we
Well, I mean-
initially thought it might have to be done at the state level, but we've come to the conclusion now it can be dealt with within the city plan itself and the council by introducing a trigger, so that should a development application that was to be code accessible exceed the permissible density, setbacks and site coverage, then it would trigger it, so it would become impact accessible. That our lawyers told us, had Monaco been impact accessible, it would never have been approved.
Okay, yeah.
So it's quite a simple change, and it doesn't even have to go to the state government, which is good. It can be dealt with here with the City of Gold Coast Council.
There's 3 cases that have been raised to me. There's Lonergan, which is on Main Beach Parade, 750 square metre block, 33 stories high, whereas currently there's a 3-story walk up there. The Lark Cafe, 24 stories, they've reduced it to 18 stories, a 400 square metre block. Now that would, and then of course you've got 0 to 0, you're losing all the setbacks, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
And
So
I think
that comes down to...
that's really going to change the character of Main Beach and other suburbs on the Gold Coast, because what we have now is a lot of high-rise that are set on large blocks of land with tennis courts, pools, beautiful gardens.
So you've got all that
We're
open
not going to
space.
see that
You've
anymore.
got all that open space,
That's
the tennis
right.
court, the landscaping.
Yeah.
You see those buildings, and
They're going to be buildings
they're taking
like...
up 25%.
That's
and
right.
these new ones are taking up, what, 80?
Well,
90,
90,
Five,
at least 90,
90%.
yeah, really
They're
good.
just buildings that, like for a CBD in Brisbane or another
Yeah.
major city. They're not Gold Coast buildings.
Yeah.
And it's not the way we want to see our suburb change.
No. So it's not that you want to stop development.
Not at all.
You can't. The Gold Coast is going to grow and
Yeah,
grow and
sure.
grow. But there needs to be some sort of common sense approach.
That's right.
That's what's been lacking actually, is common sense in the interpretation
Yeah.
of a city plan. And unfortunately, once you get one very non-compliant development approved, immediately the developers leap in with one equally non-compliant, or even more so. It was no coincidence that the day the council finally approved Monaco, the developer for the masthead building, which is 39 stories on a very, very small block, was submitted the very same day. So it was absolutely...
So masthead's 39 stories, that's
Yeah.
an 834 square metre block?
Yeah.
Yep. And yet it still got approved. And the community just astonished that this could possibly happen.
There's a few of the locals I spoke to a bit further down towards surface and Broadbeach have mentioned that the blocks down there, the 500 square metres on the waterfront, and their fear is that eventually you'll just see a cascade of 20 and 30 and 40 story buildings, basically bumper to bumper. Is that possible?
Yeah, with no light in between, pretty much.
Yeah. They'll become canyons really, with no end at street level, no light whatsoever. And of course there are severe problems with groundwater, you know, the water table. You know, we could be facing really another Miami in those beachfront areas.
So the Gold Coast that most people that live here now are from somewhere else. You know, if the population was what 240,000 in 1990, and now it's 600,000-700,000. So you've got to wonder: is the town turning into something else than what people were attracted to here in the first place? You're starting, from what I'm seeing and hearing from locals, you're starting to lose all that open space, and you're just getting overrun with a conglomeration of high rise.
Yeah, and I mean, most of us live in high rises. We don't have a problem with high rises. It's the two things, as Judy says, it's about the character of the suburb, but also the amenity of the people living in those buildings who are about to lose their light. It's going to be overshadowed, they're going to lose their privacy, and of course their views. Now, nobody owns a view, we all know that, but it all goes into the amenity.
Yeah.
And some of these towers that have been approved are only 9 metres apart. I mean, you can almost lean over and give somebody a cup of tea. And that's not what people bought into the Gold Coast for.
No, exactly. All right. So can you explain the issue with the light rail overlay?
Sure. It's light rail overlay is a little bit like code accessible zoning. There's nothing the matter with the light rail overlay concept in itself. You know, if you look at somewhere like Southport, where the Meriton is and things, it's perfectly valid to say, okay, there's going to be special provisions for that area. People can just cross the road to the tram station. It's very appropriate to have shops there and other services. No problem at all. And the people who live over at Southport, who are right on the light rail, love it. It's terrific. The problem is that they've extended the overlay to areas that are a kilometre or 1.2 kilometres away from a tram stop, which are basically residential neighbourhoods. And that, again, was never the intention of the light rail overlay. But the light rail overlay has been used as a Trojan horse to develop extremely dense development in areas where it was never intended. So again,
and the light rail is going to get pushed down to further down the coast.
Absolutely. So we're not talking about a main beach.
It's not just here.
And the problem about it as well is the council's allowing them to plan with fewer car parks, and presumably because everyone's going to be using the light rail, but we know that doesn't occur. And what does occur is that the tenants park their cars in the streets. The streets of Main Beach are getting fuller every time another building's being built because they're simply not providing car parks.
Yeah. Okay. So, what do you see? Is there a way forward? Is there a way out?
We think there is. Actually, at the moment, we're feeling quite encouraged following our meeting on Tuesday night, where the chair of the planning committee, Councillor Corgle, accepted the thought that really it would be possible to get rid of the light rail overlay in these areas that are really a long way from the light rail. And it's happened already on the beachfront. They have excised part of the beachfront area, Main Beach Parade, from the light rail overlay. So there is a precedent to do that, and it wouldn't be a difficult job to do it, and that would make an enormous difference.
Excise all of Main Beach from the light rail overlay. That would be a very good outcome.
And he was the one who suggested it, and we're following up with that now, trying to show the council how they could do that from a legal point of view and a logistical point of view. And also, secondly, to introduce that trigger, so if a development application really was very excessively non-compliant, that it would trigger, it would lead to a trigger for it to becoming impact assessable. Those two things would really go a long way to solving the problems, and they're not hard to do.
So time frame, you'd need to lobby the council to change.
Yeah, well, our plan, we've got pretty detailed plans of how to do that, which we're working, in the next 2 weeks really, we'll have submissions to council. I've already foreshadowed that to the council, but that's what we're doing. But we've got some expert advice sort of leading us in the right direction as to how we can really provide the council with a toolbox of how can they can affect these quite simple changes. So I think they know the anger in the community. I think that's been demonstrated. And I think this gives them an opportunity to say, okay, we've listened, this is what we'll do, and in the future that it'll be a much improved situation. Density will increase quite a lot, we accept that. but hopefully it'll prevent these extremely bulky buildings on exceedingly small sites.
Main Beach Association organised a meeting at the Southport Yacht Club for local residents who are concerned about the large number of high-rise developments that are occurring in the Main Beach area and right throughout the Gold Coast. And we have some highlights of that meeting. There was a lot of debate from the public. We'll show you some of the key points and you can make up your mind yourself what direction we should be heading in. Thank you.
What I would like to know is what the Main Beach Association is doing to get rid of the light rail overlay.
Well, as I said, the only bit of the light rail overlay that's left, David, is between Main Beach Parade in the east and Tedder Avenue, and I would be very open to you guys actually making it a strong position of the association that it's your preference for that to be removed. And so I raised that at the start of the meeting, and I'm very happy to stand by that. That if that's the will of the people, then it should be put forward. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Cameron, and it's nice to know that, but honestly, you're going to set a precedent, and the problem is the light rail overlay right down the coast, isn't it? And the fact that these things are code accessible and not impact accessible, and the community doesn't have a say. So I hope we win in Main Beach, but I think you need to do the same thing for the rest of the Gold Coast, personally.
But anyway, we're going to, as developers, respond to a request for information in a certain time frame. If not, their development application should be rejected. What happens in private dwellings, in suburban, in smaller developments, commercial developments, surely a developer has to do that, and you've got the responsibility and capability of putting that in.
Look, unfortunately, we have to work within the state planning parameters, okay, so we can't make them respond. The second thing I just wanted to say is that frequently we do lose patience with applicants who aren't responding to genuine issues that have been raised. And so, as I said, in the last quarter, there were 14 instances where the developer probably should have listened to what we raised in the RFI and then responded to it, and they might have got a different outcome, but they didn't. So, you know, that's the risk that they run, and we do reject things where they don't meet our expectations.
Thanks, Cameron.
Thank you. This is a question about the water table. Monaco and Midwater proposed to have 3 and 6 levels of underground car parking. This means they will have to drain the water table to build basement parking. I'm from Deville, and given our proximity to Monaco, the people who service the Deville spear pump, which waters our gardens, which have been relied upon by Monaco, have said that our spear pump won't work during the build and for some time after, and it will take at least 1 year to refill and stabilise. This means that at Deville we're going to have to use council water at a cost for at least 2 years, the time of the build and the restabilisation.
Yeah, thank you. That's a fairly long question. Look, in terms of what council can do to protect, I guess, amenity and lifestyle, at the end of the day, there's always going to be a degree of intensification of Main Beach that is different to what happened over the last 20 to 40 years. I'm probably going to digress a bit on the question. The way that council can protect the amenity and character of Main Beach is to enforce planning provisions. Now, I've heard a lot today. I was named in the last response. I've heard a lot today about performance planning. I've heard a lot today about co-accessible development. None of that prevents council making the right decisions. As a town planning consultant, we have strong performance outcomes in the planning scheme that's currently written. We have code accessible applications, yes. If those applications complied with the performance outcomes and met the requirements of the code, then the process isn't a problem. The problem is the degree of discretion applied to the granting of developments. So back to your question, the way council can protect the long-term integrity of Main Beach, and again, I'm not going to stand up here and say Main Beach shouldn't change, that density shouldn't increase. I think all that is appropriate. The question is how much. So this is about enforcing provisions that you currently have. If we have amendments 2 and 3 come into play, they are an improvement, but they're only as good as they are enforced. Now that doesn't mean we have to comply strictly with the tick in the box rules, that is code. There has to be room for discretion. The question here is how much discretion. If we continually see across the coast discretion being applied that is inconsistent with community expectations, providing those expectations are appropriate, then that we should be putting provisions in place, and council has the power to do so, to shift these into impact accessible. In the 2016 planning scheme, we lost plot ratio provisions, which were a bulk provision, which were quite critical. And most importantly, we only have one trigger to go impact assessment in a place like Main Beach, and that's height. And you guys have got unlimited height, so it's kind of irrelevant. So if the council was to consider, one, losing the light rail overlay so we can stop that process, remove podium style development, keep a landscape character, together with having a look at provisions that might make development that is too far outside the normal code provisions impact accessible, council can control it. So other than heritage listing old buildings, the way to manage this in the future is rigour in the current provisions, implementing new provisions, and then applying rigour there. Keeping in mind, I'm not standing up here to advocate that we should have no flexibility.
Thank you.
I just want to ask you both a couple of questions. This land that we were on, basically from Main Beach all the way down to Tugan, would have been cut up in the 30s and the 1920s. And if you look at the old plans, there are blocks of land that are 500 square metres, 400 square metres, and then there's a block that's 2,000 square metres. When do you think it became okay to put high-rise on one of those original beach house blocks? When did that change?
But that's only changed in the last few years.
In the last few years.
And it would have been
in the 1980s, when most of the high-rise were built in Main Beach, they were on very large blocks
They were
of
very
land
large
with,
blocks.
you know, great
If
gardens.
you look at the original subdivision plan, they've set aside large blocks for commercial buildings or a hotel or a block of flats. They didn't set aside the 400 and 500 and 600 square metre blocks for 30-storey buildings.
No, they did not, and it has only happened in the last couple of years,
Very much
and
so.
that's why people are starting to get angry on the Gold Coast, because this has never been something that's been a problem until now.
No. And the other point is, do you think if you go to Bondi Beach or if you go to Manly Beach, do you think you'll see a 40-storey building on the waterfront there?
Absolutely not. I mean, New South Wales is, you know, is so much more stringent, and of course, I think there's a different culture there too. That, you know, places like Bondi and Coogee and places, people are so protective of it. There would be, you know, mass demonstrations, total huge outrage if anyone tried to do that.
So you wouldn't think to put a 40-storey building on the waterfront of Byron Bay, would you?
I don't think so.
No, they wouldn't get permission for that in Byron.
So I just can't get my head around, why is it okay to do it on the Gold Coast?
Well, and the interesting point is that Byron, of course, is in New South Wales, but if we take the Sunshine Coast as a good example, exactly the same planning act, and yet it's being interpreted in a totally different way by the local council, which shows that really it's the local council's interpretation that's the problem, not the State Planning Act itself.
So as you said, you'd need to put triggers in there to make something, to change from code assessed to impact assessed, to stop these sort of developments going through.
Definitely.
And we can actually show the council how to do it. We've got some very experienced town planners and architects and builders on our team, and we can see quite clearly how it can be done in a way that's measurable and very simple.
So obviously you're prepared to work with the council to move forward.
Absolutely.
And to come to a better resolution, a better situation
Yeah.
than what you're in
And it
now.
makes life easier for them, because I think they feel pretty uncomfortable with a lot of what's happening. I'm certain they do. So
I think they're also under a lot of pressure from the state government, who keeps telling them that they've got to accommodate, you know, more and more people in the years ahead, because our population in this country is going to continue to grow. And I, you know, personally, I think we need to start having the conversation about what population we want to see in this country, given that a lot of it is, you know, immigrant inspired, and it is about that as well.
Yeah. And also, if you continue to build high rises all the way down the Gold Coast Strip, it's going to have an impact on road traffic, schools, shopping centres, public amenities, parking issues. Where does it stop?
The other interesting thing is that the council is not obliged to take into account in any way the capacity of schools and hospitals.
No.
The council says, well, that's state government, it's not our problem. So there's this great disconnect between the council and the state government. So over in Labrador, for example, which has been declared a total growth area, the schools are already at capacity. And there's very poor public transport. There's very poor public transport. So the very things that you need if you're going to have a denser population don't exist. But none of that is taken into consideration. It's extraordinary, actually.
I spoke to a gentleman the other night, and he said to me, at some point when you go to Main Beach, you're going to need a blanket in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Because you have no sunshine
That's
after,
right.
after
Yes,
midday.
That's right.
the lack of light is a very serious problem. We know it on the beach already. I mean,
Well, there'll be no point going to the beach in the
No.
afternoon, because they'll
No.
just be in shade.
In a way, they're killing the golden goose.
Well, they're destroying, from what I'm seeing, and I've worked and travelled all around the world, and it does seem like you're destroying the very thing that attracted people here in the first place.
Exactly.
The whole atmosphere will change.
Yep. And they say, oh well, if you want a sort of peaceful sort of place with a lot of air and stuff, go and live at Kingscliff. I mean, that's the response of the council. You know, it's this sort of, if you don't like it here, well, go somewhere else. Which is not what people want to do.
No. Well, good luck with your endeavour with the council.
Thank
and
you.
the state government.
We feel moderately optimistic.
I think you have to be
Yeah,
optimistic.
you have to. You have to keep trying.
Yes, you do. But the great thing is we've got a great community here, and as you said, because it's small, Main Beach, you know, it's quite compact. It's easy to get to people. There really is a village culture, which does make it easier to get people galvanised and into action.
Definitely.
But in a way that's sort of respectful, logical. You know, you've just got to keep your mind on the main game. What's the end we want to achieve, and how do we best go about it?
Well, good luck, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Good.
Hi, my name's Dave Lonergan, Changing Face of the Gold Coast. In this segment, we have looked at Main Beach. We attended the Main Beach Association meeting at the Southport Yacht Club. We heard from a lot of locals and government officials as to the current developments that are underway and the proposed developments that are underway on a lot of residentially small blocks. And you've got to keep in mind, is this the vision we all had for the Gold Coast? Is it the way we want to see our town progress over the next 20, 30 years as development increases? Because the population is going to increase, there's no doubt about it. You really want to have a think about how you want to see your town progress. Stay tuned.